Okay, hello and welcome to today's NFDI talk. My name is Wolf Zink. I am Scientific Officer at the NFDI Head Office. And in our NFDI talk series, every 2 weeks, scientists from different disciplines present exciting topics around research data infrastructures and data management. All the talks are live streamed and saved on our YouTube channel. Exclusively on this Zoom channel, we have opportunity to discuss the topics afterwards, and you can ask questions here. Today, we continue our 3-part series introducing the basic services for NFDI. To become an NFDI basic service, 3 different phases must be passed: the initialization phase, the integration, and ramp-up phase. Responsible for this process is baseline NFDI. 4 weeks ago already, we had a part 1 where we got an introduction to terminology services for NFDI, the basic services that is currently in the initialization phase. Today, we will learn about another basic service that also is in the initialization phase, persistent identifiers for NFDI, which will be presented to us by 2 members of the project team, Stephanie Hagemann-Wilholt and Philipp Vida. And in addition to this, Daniel Martini will jump in and provide a use case from the Aqua consortia. Stephanie is dedicated to improve the usage of PIDs within NFDI as a part of her work at TIB in the Department for PIDs and Metadata Services. But she's also working on leading the German DOI and ORCID consortia. Before starting at TIB, she worked for the German Council for Scientific Information Infrastructure, a crucial instance in Germany that aims to define and improve the political conditions for research data management in Germany. Philipp is Professor, Group Leader and Deputy Head of the Gesellschaft für wissenschaftliche Datenverarbeitung, GWDG, in Göttingen. He's also part of the NFDI consortia Text Plus and the principal investigator of PID4NFDI. But before the 3 will tell us about the PID4NFDI service in detail, Natalia Redberg, the managing director of PID4NFDI, will kick off today's session with a quick introduction to PID4NFDI. So welcome everyone to Natalia, Stephanie, Philipp, and Daniel. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Could you hear me? You nod your heads vigorously if you can. Okay. So I just want to take a few minutes to introduce you to BASE. Many of you may have heard this before, but some of you may not. So it's good to just remind everybody exactly what we're doing at BASE to set the context for this PID talk. So as you know, the 26 consortia are all based around disciplinary in data finding and data relevance for research data. And BASE is very special here because it's slightly different. It's providing a level of generic basic services for all these different data relevant consortia. And the aim is to set up a series of basic services, horizontal services that can really send out many different kinds of services so that all the different consortia can rely on these basic services. These are horizontal services to realize fair data management and many data sharing challenges and different kinds of solutions. And the aim is that all these consortia will be able to use these services by the time they become fully operable and ramped up. And they should also be interoperable with different standards within Germany and also outside, with, for example, the European Open Science Cloud and also other international federated data sharing systems. And the important thing here is that they're using existing standards and communities within the German research community and bringing these together and understanding these different synergies. So the services shouldn't be built from scratch. They should be bringing the different players together to create these services. And that is what BASE is doing. It is establishing the framework for this. And lastly, what is important is that it's bringing together the NFDI community, and the services should come up, it's bottom up, from their very needs. So as many of you will be involved in the sections and the working groups in NFDI, this is where these discussions will take place and where the ideas for these services should arise from. So it's very much bottom up, and this should then work to be able to serve this very large NFDI community along disciplinary ways, so providing a horizontal layer of core basic services. So that's in a nutshell the aim of BASE. And the way it does this, as you will know, is through 3 stages of doing this. So it's really kind of establishing the process in 3 ways: initialization, integration, and ramping up. And PID service you'll hear from now is at the initialization stage of this. And it's really driving the user need throughout the different services and getting buy-in in each different stage. So through this stepwise development, the NFDI consortia will decide if they would like to take the service to the next level. And all different things happen within different stage. So the initialization stage will be understanding user needs within the consortia and doing requirements analysis. Integration will be more technical and really trying to embed the understanding of how to use this service within the consortia. And then finally, ramping up will be dealing with TLR9's issues and really kind of trying to get the governance frameworks and rolling the service out among the consortia once it has become operational. So this is pre-operational services, and it does this by allocating funds, flexible funds at each of the 3 service stages, and project consortia, service consortia can apply for funds at each separate stage. So it has to do this through 3 different application processes, through one application through each of the 3 different stages. And that allows a consensus building among the NFDI through each of the stages. What it doesn't do is actually run the operational services. This should happen at the end once the services become operational. So it's really very much providing the framework as we go along and working closely with the projects as we do that. A lot of people ask what exactly is a basic service, and that's not completely black and white, but of course it should be something that's offering a core technical service along the lines of storage or computing, or perhaps software development, processes, workflows. It could also be around training, research data management, perhaps service desks, but it should have a level of technicity about it. That again can be discussed within the sections and the working groups of the sections, or indeed any of these questions can be addressed to the base team. But what it should do, a service, is create added value for the community and be of use to all the different consortia. It should bring together, as I said, all the existing frameworks and all the existing solutions and technical providers within the national framework. And they should really be considering, as they develop in this 3-stage process, how they can be sustainable and do they have buy-in from the institutions that run the services. And then BASE will add this added value during the 3 services by checking that they are, we can track the KPIs and the usage and the software development of the service. Just quickly, because I think it's important to understand the levels of buy-in over this 3-stage service. The hands there you can see represent the consortia. In the first initialization stage, 25% of the consortia, it's only 25%, have to can vote for having this initialization for 1 year of a particular service. And this is what will be carried out is realizing the concept of the service, carrying out a SWOT analysis and user requirements. Integration is longer. This takes 2 years. This is 50% buy-in, and this is really setting up the budget lines as well, but the costs and also how it's going to be interoperable with other standards and international standards, and paving the way for its usage at the consortia, as I said. And then ramping up, we haven't got there yet. That's 75%. That's in a couple of years' time, we'll get there. 75% of the consortia will buy into it, and that will get to TRL 7 or 8, and then issues such as sustainability of the service will be critical at this point. So that's in a nutshell really what BASE does. It's a very quick overview. We're happy to discuss anything further. This is part of, as was said at the beginning, of 3 talks, because these are the services we have at the moment. Terminology service is in initialization stage, and so is PID. That's to the talk today. IAM is in integration stage, and you can hear more about that on May the 6th. So we're very happy we have so many of you with us today, and it'll be interesting for the consortia to hear an NFDI community about the PID service itself today. Do come to us with any questions. We are going to bug you with 1 questionnaire during the actual talk, because it's very useful for us from the BASE team to know who you are. We don't know if you're coordinators or if you're more on the technical side, if you're technical coordinators or management coordinators in NFDI. So do please fill in the questionnaire. You can do it at the end, and you can add in any questions for BASE for the team then. And this could also be useful for the PID team. Okay, thank you very much for listening, and I'm very happy to hand over to our speakers and hear more about what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start sharing. Can you see my screen?
Yes, can hear you fine.
Thank you. Just have to sort my screens here. Okay, so I'd like us to start talking about what PID4NFDI actually is. So as Naila already mentioned, we are a project within PID4NFDI in initialization phase, and we just started in January, so we are quite fresh. Partners are DataCite and the Hagemann-Wilholt Open Science Office, and the project is led by GW, DG, and TIB together. We are focusing on persistent identifiers. This is what PID stands for. And in the beginning, I would like to answer the question why PIDs are important, and therefore we should look at what PIDs offer. They provide a unique identification of research resources, persons, institutions, projects, grants, devices, and lots of other things, which you can see on the first slide, for example. And PIDs can address the whole life cycle of research data and connected entities and enable more accurate, richer, and standardized metadata, and can thus improve discoverability and interoperability of metadata to research data. They reduce administrative overhead of metadata ingestion and updating, reduce errors through automated processes, and also support validation processes, and create links between research resources and provide context information about them. So it's an opportunity to build a PID-based ecosystem of open metadata and research resources and entities to enable findability and reuse of research data in the end. And to fulfill these functions, PIDs also need a few things. So they need awareness for their potential to unlock the described functionalities. They need agreement on and compliance with international standards, which are ideally negotiated and developed in open systems with the communities in need of PIDs. They need social and financial commitment for persistence, because persistence is not just a technical issue, but based on the questions of whom takes responsibility for maintenance of PIDs and their metadata. And they need awareness for their necessity, because PIDs are the backbone of fair research data management, and there's no FAIR without PIDs. As you can see here on this slide, you have the FAIR principles, which are quite famous now. And all those statements marked in light blue are principles directly related to PIDs and their impact. And our aim with PID4NFDI is to make these advantages and functionalities of PIDs visible and usable for the NFDI. So therefore, we will have a look at the current landscape of PID practices in the NFDI and analyze different use cases in the consortia. We will have a look at discipline-specific requirements. So do we have PID newcomer communities or experienced communities? Do they need specific information according to metadata? Do we have resource-specific requirements regarding to entities like research data, instruments, physical objects, etc., with different metadata requirements? We will have different stages of research life cycles, so from ephemeral data to publications, and system-specific requirements. So we will have a look at the infrastructure used for PID registration and integration. We want to shed a spotlight on interoperability because we are working on the base of existing and mature PID services and operating with internationally established technical metadata standards. And therefore, we want to follow the very idea of the NFDI as a social effort to address commonalities and to close gaps between NFDI-specific requirements and existing and emerging solutions. We want to provide support, so training offers to unleash the full potential of PIDs and metadata to operationalize FAIR. And we want to put a limelight on the impact metadata can have, for example, to connect resources via PIDs and realize knowledge graphs like the PID graph. One big issue is governance, because PIDs are a genuine element of quality assured research data management, and there have to be responsibilities for PID maintenance. So we have to look at the necessary conditions for persistence and financing issues, because research data management is not for free, and neither is PID registration. And finally, we want to investigate options for cross-service usage. And our last objective is to network, of course, in this national network the NFDI provides. So we want to connect with national PID stakeholders, but also with international ones. We want to ensure the visibility of the case of PIDs and ensure that the community will be heard and that the process will be demand-driven. Here you can see the 3 phases that Naila already mentioned, and the objectives we have for these 3 phases. After the ramping up, we want to have synchronized PID services with an NFDI-wide PID policy, usage of metadata quality tools, and all of this coordinated with other activities in base for NFDI. But in the following, I would like to present our activities for the first initialization phase in further detail. So in our first work package, covering a landscape and requirement analysis, we want to look at the scattered PID landscape according to existing and evolving practices in NFDI consortia. We want to identify common features according to type, scope, and dissemination, evaluate optimization potentials, for example, regarding to interoperability, metadata harmonization, metadata quality. And in the first phase, we want to do a survey. We are just in the preparation of this survey. And if you're doing anything with PIDs and the NFDI, please contact us, because we don't want to have a broad survey, but to contact exactly the persons who are responsible for PIDs in the consortia. This email address will also be on our last slide, so there's still a chance. Yes, in our second phase, we want to do some interviews with use case partners, and this is all building up on preliminary work we did in the PID working group in the section Common Infrastructures. We already did a survey and a stakeholder workshop there, and our preliminary findings from this analysis was that PIDs are currently in the consortia most commonly used for datasets, of course. And this is followed by researchers, metadata, journal articles, software, and affiliations. And for the registration or minting of PIDs, instruments play a role. And the plan for some consortia is to take greater account of using and/or minting PIDs for funders, physical objects, collections, workflows, and models. And our second work package, we are focusing on interoperability. We want to map identified requirements to capabilities of service providers, evaluate options for use of services, for example, the PID meta resolver from GWDG and the PID graph from DataSite. We want to develop a concept for the alignment of metadata requirements with international standards. Want to have a first use of metadata quality tools or dashboards for metadata quality assessment. And this will be the base for a concept on incentivization of metadata creation for the integration phase. Maybe a short excursus on metadata quality. How do we understand this? According to Bruce and Hillman, there's 7 criteria of metadata quality. So there's completeness, that means which metadata fields are useful, accuracy, is the metadata correct, provenance, is the source of or creation process of the metadata documented, conformance to expectations, which means is the metadata based on internationally recognized standards, logical consistency and coherence, is the metadata structured in the same way and does it not contain any contradictions? Timeliness, does the metadata reflect the actual status of the described resources? And accessibility, so can the metadata be retrieved now and permanently? And completeness as a criteria is one of the criteria with which quality can be made measurably in a quantitative form. Although this is also a process of social negotiation as to which status is defined as complete. So there's not one set of complete metadata, but yeah, we have to define this very carefully. My colleague Sarah El-Ghibali from DataCite already did some analysis, and we can see this in this example here. She looked at missing properties and subproperties in recommended fields according to the DataCite metadata schema, and found out that in this example, for example, related identifiers are missing, which means that there's no linking to any other resource of this data set. And so there's a lot of context information missing. Here's a second example on missing properties in optional fields. Here, for example, sizes and formats are missing, which is relevant information for reuse of the described resources. We have a third work package on support and training, and there we want to develop a concept for training on one hand on PID implementation management, targeting at infrastructure managers and data stewards, and also material and added values of PIDs and at researchers. We want to coordinate these activities with the section EduTrain and the PID network project. This is a DFG-funded project, and partners are DataCite and Helmholtz Open Science Office, as well as University Library Bielefeld, German National Library, and TIB. We want to provide cookbooks for PID registration and research workflows considering the use cases identified, and want to further extend this in the integration phase. So I already mentioned, we're also looking at governance issues. We want to analyze, document, and provide an overview of relevant governance, business, and license models of PID providers, evaluate risks and mitigation strategies according to the principles for open scholarly infrastructure, which are tackling the provider's governance, sustainability, and insurances. We want to provide a decision model for use cases, so which are the advantages and disadvantages, the costs, and we want to focus on frequently used PID services, including these of the project partners. In the end, we want to have a concept for organizational integration of PID infrastructure according to the structure of the NFDI. And in our last work package, we want to develop a communication strategy, so set up and use communication channels within and outside NFDI, create a dialogue platform, and we want to conduct a stakeholder workshop as a platform for discussion of future plans and identification of further needs and challenges in the NFDI. This is planned as a satellite event of the base for NFDI user conference in November in Berlin, but we will focus on the needs of the users from the very beginning and identify them on the basis of the selected use cases. And one of these will be presented now with a deeper look into the use cases from our partner from FairAgro, and the case will be outlined by Daniel Martini. And afterwards, Philipp Vida from GWDG will present 3 more use cases in a quick overview. Thank you very much. I will hand over to Daniel.
Hey, thank you. I hope you can hear me. So then, yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, actually, as has already been mentioned, I want to present you actually two use cases for persistent identifiers in agrosystems research. And because basically this is what our consortium FAIRagro is about, dealing with research data management in agrosystems. And as it has already been mentioned during the talk, during the survey, most people related the usage of persistent identifiers to data sets. But actually what I want to present today is that you can also anchor PIDs within the data itself. So this goes deeply not only into the metadata level, but really into the data level. And basically the idea is to be able to create digital twins for research objects within our domain, which can then be tracked during the whole data and research life cycle, and be assigned with metadata and provenance, for example. And for that, we picked actually two examples. Plant genetic resources on the one hand and soil samples on the other hand. And I will start with illustrating a little bit the use case about plant genetic resources. Next slide, please. Yeah, actually, as the situation is today, plant genetic resource material, these are actually samples taken from plants in the fields, in field trials, for example. Then they will be genetically analyzed, and in their current stage, they are either getting specific identifiers specific for the database therein. There are also certain activities of having global persistent UIDs. But I will come back later to the gaps and deficits we currently have. Of course, there are also metadata assigned to this, and this is already rooted in existing research data infrastructures. Next image, please. Yeah, basically, I already explained this. It's dealing with samples from plant material, and then these plant material will be genetically analyzed. There are at the moment already existing identifier services, but as mentioned here, for example, for identifiers.org, there's a proprietary global resolver, and there are also certain metadata standards also already connected to typical plant genetic resources. So MIAPE, that's the minimum information on a plant phenotyping experiment, is actually one metadata standard which already can capture on an identifier metadata necessary for plant genetic resources. And if you move on to the next image, then you can actually see there are different levels of granularity that we need to tackle within our research. On the one hand, you might have samples on the molecular basis, or you might have cellular extracts. Then samples could also come from certain plant tissues, or whole organs from plants, so leaf samples or root samples, for example. And in some cases, well, you have the material of a whole plant, or you might have from a field trial from the parcels, for example, all the seeds which have been harvested on a certain parcel. So there are different levels of granularity if you look at the organism parts, which we have to consider. Then next slide, please. Yeah, regarding the data connected to this, to these samples, I think key message here is there is a wide variety. It might be image data, it might be environmental data, So growth conditions and things like that. It might be plant data, the species, genotype, seed origin, and so on. So regarding metadata assignment to these samples, it's actually really not simple. Because it can cover a wide variety of different data actually. So next image, please. And typically, if you look at the sample flow, well, you have the plant material from the field, then this might be collected. So this is an example image showing a seed sample. And then during analysis, for example, you might have extracts or certain seeds within arrays. So-called trace, where you do analysis of fluorescence with certain enzymes, for example, and things like that. So if you move on, that again already illustrates how actually sample material can be split into a large tree of different samples. So you might start with a seed bag of what has been harvested in a field trial. Then you take from this, you might take subsamples, seed bulks, only subsets of these, and then moving towards the tray. Then determining here in this example, it's determining with cameras certain properties of the seeds, and everything leads to new samples. So this is really a kind of tree which can split up quite intensively. So next image, please. And the idea that we want to use within the use case, there is already some kind of international standard around this. That's the International Generic Sample Number. It originally comes from the geosciences, but its use case is actually providing a persistent identifier for individual samples within different research domains, actually. So the next slide, please. There is another use case, which is actually soil sample data. So within our consortium, we have different repositories and research data infrastructures dealing with soil data. There is the Bonares repository or the EDAFO-based repository on soil organisms. Usually within these repositories, we have the situation that the data sets are already well identified, as indicated, but the sample data are often CSV files. And it really makes it difficult to manage this because, well, identifier assignment is up to the researcher. You don't have linkability between different data sets, so it's also difficult to track the sample provenance and history of samples. And if you move on to the next slide. Actually, this is some kind of idealized workflow that we would envision for the future. So actually, you have this situation that you do in-field sampling. At that stage already, you want to assign a persistent identifier to the sample so that it doesn't get exchanged or mixed up when carrying it to the laboratory. Within the laboratory, you typically then could build something like a context. So there are several samples within a study, for example. And then you do the laboratory analysis on these samples, determining parameters like pH value, content of certain chemicals, and things like that. And from that, again, you aggregate the data more. There might go several sub-data sets with samples into a single data publication, which then ends up in a research data repository. And what we envision with a single sample identification would be that you could more easy reuse the data which has been published, because you can, in a further data publication, refer to individual samples which have already been taken for another data set. So that is the basic idea. behind our use case. Now maybe one of the question is, why don't you simply use a DOI for it? I think that is connected to the services that you expect behind a persistent identifier. Like, for example, for this use case, you would need something like pre-allocated identifiers, which you can then use offline in the field because you often don't have internet connection and things like that. So these are all functionalities and requirements that you would then have to consider in setting up persistent identification services, and especially for samples. So in that context. Yeah, that's it so far for this use case. And with that, I hand back to Stephanie, and I think we have another use case which will be presented. Thank you.
Yes, Philipp will start from here.
Yes, so just for clarification for you listening today, so thank you, Daniel, first and foremost. So that is exactly what we need as PID4NFDI to get a very fine-grained understanding, detailed understanding of what you need so that we can adjust our project and help you with your use cases. As we don't have enough time, so we have gathered plenty of use cases through our work on our proposal. So we don't have enough time to show them all in detail. I just wanted to share 2 other use cases in a quicker fashion with you. And the first one comes from Consort SVD, thanks to Peter Mutschke, who from GISIS, who actually brought this to us. And I will briefly explain the core ideas and in particular the core requirements which come from these use cases towards persistent identifiers. Can I have the next slide, please? So as you can imagine, Consort SVD equals social sciences, and PIDs, of course, are used there. But as we have heard before, it's the same here. PIDs used on, in this case, study and dataset level, but there are more requirements where PIDs could be useful. And in that case, one example, I think, which we all understand is survey variables. So going deeper within the surveys, and have identifiers for the actual variables in there. So that's the overall use case, and that's the use case Consort SVD is looking into. Can I have the next slide, please? If you look at an example here, so we have text examples, and as we are sharing the slides, I guess you can also have a closer look later on. You'll see that researchers often do not use or reference the whole data set, but some of their elements. And in this case, we are looking today into survey variables. And you see that there is text used to actually describe what is meant in the end. So there are highlighted examples which you could read and see, that, for example, if you take the bottom part, that the actual question from the survey is paraphrased instead of citing a concrete variable in the lack of not having, for example, a PID for that. Yeah. And that is something which, if I understand it correctly, would be something the social sciences would love to have. And that is a requirement which they communicated to PID4NFDI. And we are, of course, taking up these kind of use cases and requirements and are trying to find solutions for that. Next slide, please. So for Consort SVD, and particularly the measure 1 and task 5, they would like to see, that we can have clear and reliable citations on a more fine-grained level. And you see that also in text research. So I'll talk a bit more about text research in a minute, where you maybe want to reference not only a whole edition or a whole book, but pages, maybe sentences, these kind of things. And that would help to make research data easier to find, to boost also the citation, to more directly actually access the data or the metadata, And of course, to help reusing the data in the end, because it is more on what researchers actually want to have, and to maybe even help generating new ways to work with data and metadata, and with work all around the social sciences. So in this case, there is an infrastructure based on EPIC PIDs already, and some of the things are already there. But, and that's where PID4NFDI is helping and is also funded for, is to complete this use case, to consult in that case, and to help get more parts of what Consort SVD actually wants to have up and running. So we can go to the next one. Sorry, I forgot the last slide. In particular, if you ask the colleagues from the social sciences, then they will also tell you there's more to it. Yeah, we talked about parts of questionnaires, in this case, more fine-grained look into studies, but they also think further, maybe citing video fragments, surveyed questions, audio files, or even part of the audio files, transcripts, and these kind of things. And that's what we see in many of our use cases, is that people value the existence of PIDs, but they would like to have PIDs for more use cases, for more application scenarios. Okay, and then last but not least, an example use case from the humanities, thanks to Jan Brase from the SUB in Göttingen. And I mean, we all know we have lots of different kind of research data in the humanities, and some of those can be referenced through PIDs, other research data cannot. So it's not only, of course, the view on the different data, the view of the different data objects is of course far from complete. And you know that we have a number of related NFDI consortia which are dealing actually with data all around the humanities. So I would not go into detail here about the different kind of data objects, but you can imagine that depending on in which discipline you're working in, that some of those actually, like digital objects or metadata, you can already reference through PIDs, others you cannot. And if you can go to the next slide, please. I also brought an example where this is shown better. So we have epigraphical databases. That's an application scenario from the humanities, where we have multiple different data objects like photography, symbols, textual editions, but also maps and other representations of these maps, which are forming one particular research data body for a particular research. And that's something that's only one example from the humanities. So there are plenty of those where you have parts where you can actually already apply PIDs to, others you cannot. And in particular, the connection between these things, if you think knowledge graphs, for example, these things are far from being solved for all these particular use cases which we have. If you go one further, this is something where, among other things, Text Plus, which is one of the NFDI consortia, is working on. Text Plus originated from Clarine and Daria, so there's a close connection to that. And they already have a repository, which is the Daria repository, where DOIs are already assigned to research data. So this is one repository being part of the Text Plus service portfolio here. But as you can imagine, I mean, the SUB Göttingen leads the DataCite consortium with more than 60 partners as a DOI help desk for all the humanities, and there are plenty of different other use cases, plenty of different levels where people would like to mint PIDs for. So this is, I would say, like an umbrella use case for many other use cases, which we would like to interact with and where PID4NFDI could help. And if you give me the last slide, please. They also came up with a wish list for PID4NFDI, and it's not only technical, but also on another level, because we often see that not only in the humanities, but maybe in particular also there, people struggle a bit with the ease to obtain PIDs and with the fact, that they need to have a contract first. So originating from this use case is also the requirement, and that's something which we in PID4NFDI, as Stephanie already said, also already have on our agenda, is to make sure that we have a good business model within the NFDI, so that people can get easier and potentially, at least for the individual researcher or the repository operator, not to deal actually with all these contractual and financial things, but just use PIDs for their use cases. And based on that, this use case also would like to have, and that's also something which would be of great value for the humanities, to have a central overview and analysis of PIDs assigned through the NFDI, share the experience also with other disciplines. I mean, we already have seen in this talk that there are commonalities which we have to discuss. I mentioned that already, but the sustainable business model, I think it's not only something which we have to discuss for PIDs, but for the NFDI in general, but it comes up here too. And of course, how we are going to guarantee a support, help desk and training, not only during the funding of PID4NFDI, but also later on. I think that was it, giving you a short glimpse of what PID4NFDI is doing, which kind of use cases we are trying to support. If you want to have more information, here's the URL. And we really would like to encourage you to contact us. Stephanie already mentioned that, with your use cases, but also with questions or suggestions. And we are definitely going for the next phase. So we are happy to incorporate feedback or also your use cases in our next proposal. Thank you very much. And we are open for questions now.
Yeah, thank you, Netschla, Stephanie, Philipp, and Daniel for this presentation. Our series for basic services will continue on May the 6th with IM4NFDI, the Identity and Access Management Service. And in the next talk in 2 weeks, we will get to know BIRD, an Invenio-based platform for research data management in business, economics, and related fields, which will be presented by Klaus Tochtermann and Ahmed Zadeh. I hope to see you there again. I will stop the live stream now, and then we can go into our discussion. Just a second.